Hello, good morning, everybody. This is your final Muckboots in the Capitol weekly update from the Oregon State Legislature on June 16th, 2025, with Friends of Family Farmers. I am Alice Morrison. I am the co-executive director of Friends of Family Farmers, and I'm in charge of our policy and advocacy program. So I will be delivering you this last update of the session. Thanks to all of you who've stuck with us from the very beginning back in January and followed all of the legislative efforts and changes being made at the state legislature here in Oregon that impact our community food system. So as always, we will start off with an update on FOF priorities. Then we'll look at other things that we have been following. There's a couple of things that are still having some movement. Then looking ahead to the last little bit of the legislative calendar, and then discussing the Rulemaking Advisory Committee at the Department of Land Conservation and Development regarding farm stand rules that is of major interest to a lot of folks in our network. All right, so these updates are much the same as they were last week. So our state meat inspection bill, just to recap, this bill rights a budgetary wrong in the Oregon Department of Agriculture's staffing levels for the state meat inspection program. Although this program was authorized in 2020, got its USDA cooperative agreement signed in 2022, and has been sending out grant funds to get more facilities up and running for 2 bienniums now. They do not have any dedicated staff members in inspector positions. So we have requested with the help of the folks at ODA to get 2 full-time equivalents. So not necessarily 2 people, but 2 full-time equivalent worth of staffing time for this program phased in over the next biennium, to make sure that the facilities that the state has been investing in to upgrade can be available to farmers on an ongoing and regular basis, so that folks can once again find consistency and availability in meat processing, especially for independent producers like the folks we work with. So the fiscal is about $275,000 for each biennium. And where it is right now, we had very good reception in the House Agriculture Committee where this bill originated. It was a committee bill, and it passed out of that committee in February, unanimously went on down to Ways and Means. It was identified as a priority bill for the House Ag Committee. Thank you to the co-chairs, Reps Hellman Owens, for identifying that as a priority. And now it still sits in Ways and Means, and we're going to talk about what that means in a little bit. But we can reiterate our wonderful news from last week is that our bill, HB 3372, which did allow folks, it righted a very confusing set of exemptions that were allowed for domestic well users. So under previous law, well, since 1955, folks have been allowed to irrigate a half acre with their domestic well for any purpose, as long as it was for personal use. So any purpose other than commercial agriculture. So you could have a lawn, you could have flowers, you could have a garden, you could grow trees, you could water that half acre for your personal sheep to graze. You could do whatever you wanted with it, as long as you did not have any commercial intentions for anything grown on that land. You were also allowed to use 5,000 gallons per day from your domestic well without a water right for any single commercial or industrial purpose, as long as that was not commercial irrigation. So we worked with folks across the spectrum of water users, water conservationists, OWRD, legislators, to find a solution that would allow folks to use that half acre for commercial gardening if they so choose in part or whole. So you could have a little bit of it that's commercial, you could have all of it that's commercial, whatever it is within that half acre footprint, and use 3,000 of your 5,000 gallon per day commercial allocation for commercial irrigation. You can use the rest of that total 5,000 gallons. So if you use your full 3,000 for irrigation, you have 2,000 left over, and you can use that for whatever else you need to do, post-harvest handling, washing your vegetables to bring them to market, use it for making value-added products under the Farm Direct Producer Process exemption, like pickles and jam and all that kind of thing. So you still get your 5,000 gallons of commercial usage, and up to 3,000 of that can be used for irrigation on a daily basis. Cannabis was excluded as an eligible crop for this exemption, and the Lower Umatilla Basin Groundwater Management Area was excluded as an eligible location for this exemption until a sunset in January 2028. This bill had hearings in April, passed out of House Ag, passed off the House floor, went to Senate Natural Resources. Fun little buddy. There we go. Had a couple of hearings in Senate Natural Resources, had the amendment that excluded the guama adopted and passed unanimously out of the Senate Natural Resources Committee, and then passed in general. It passed the Senate floor vote with only one opposed. That's an incredible amount of bipartisan support. Passed its, I keep not correcting that. It's May 29th. There is no May 39th. We know this. And both the Speaker and the House President, or both the Speaker of the House and the Senate President, signed the bill, and the governor, it is not awaiting the governor's signature. I should have updated this. It was signed last week. The governor signed the bill. There is no undoing. This is it is law now, and it has the effective date of January 1st. So just keep that in mind for everyone watching this, that yes, the bill has passed, but the effective date is January 1st, and we have already reached out to OWRD, the Water Resources Department, who's in charge of enforcing water use in our state, and folks at OSU Small Farms, and we have we're all on the same page that we are going to be doing a lot of outreach to everybody in the community over the next 6 months to help everyone get up to speed on the new rules and make sure everyone is in compliance when that effective date comes around on January 1st. So you can now make some plans for commercial gardening on your domestic well for this 2026 season. And we also want to just say a really big thank you to everyone who participated in this campaign. We started this way back in fall of 2023. With folks coming forward saying that enforcement had changed on this issue that has been on the books since 1955, but enforcement changed drastically in fall of 2023. And that led to a series of 20 community meetings across 2024. Thank you to all the more than 600 people who came out to all of those meetings to learn more about this issue and tell us what you think a solution could look like. Legislators who stood up with us and stood with us, including a huge shout out to Representative Owens and Rep. Helm, who helped make this a priority and helped us find a workable solution, and everybody who gave expert advice on this bill throughout the process. We reached out to absolutely everybody, stakeholders across the spectrum, water users, water conservation groups, everybody who gave expert advice and made this possible. We're very grateful for everyone. But yes, the governor has signed it. It has become law. And it will go into effect on January 1, and look out for more information from us along the implementation journey. We are staying very closely abreast of all changes and any guidance that's being put out. Cool. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is two priority bills that we've talked about a little bit, not just a little bit. They were featured at our rally day, and we have some budget priorities first. I'm sorry. We're going to talk about Ways and Means in just a moment, but the budget is extremely tight this year. On May 14th, we got the final revenue forecast for the state, and that painted a picture of about a $744 million deficit. So we have less money as a state than we thought we would, and that has led to some pretty bleak outlooks on new and non-continuing service level programs. So the things that we have identified in the budget letter that we send out to all of the Ways and Means committee members and especially leadership to highlight are that our priorities are HB 2164, our state meat inspection bill, which we talked about earlier, HB 2979, the food system resilience grant funds that are housed at OCFSN and OFMA, Food for All Oregonians, Double Up Food Bucks, Farm to School, and the Oregon Ag Heritage Program. All right, so We are very close to the end of session now, which means that those bills that have been sitting in Ways and Means could have been assigned to a subcommittee, but that's done now. All the subcommittees have stopped meeting, especially the subcommittee on the Natural Resources Subcommittee, which is where a lot of the ag and land use and things like that, those programs tend to have their bills sent. So that subcommittee is no longer meeting. We are so close to the end of the session that they are not putting anything on the agenda, which means that the only option moving forward is the budget reconciliation bill. This is also colloquially known as the Christmas tree bill, and it is a little bit of a black box. This is where we have done the due diligence of helping all of you all out there connect with your legislator, telling them that this is important, telling them that that these programs make a difference in your community, and that we really need to see these programs continued because they not only make a difference for the people who are receiving funding through those grant programs or what have you, but they also have ripple effects. This is about creating community resilience, creating ways for rural communities to feed themselves, and recirculating money in our economy so that we are taking care of each other. And these programs, we've highlighted them in many, many different ways, and we hope to see them show up in the budget reconciliation bill, which should be coming out anytime now. So this is a bill that, so we have all the agency budgets. The agency budgets are their own vehicles. They have bill numbers, they do their own thing. Those have already been passed through Ways and Means. Then we have all the bills that were passed through the subcommittees, which are when those bills themselves, so just what's written in that bill, gets passed independently. All the other things that are left over, the leadership of Ways and Means is in charge of parsing through that and determining, well, this can get funding, this won't get funding, this will get partial funding. And then all of those other things are lumped into one giant bill, which is called the Christmas tree bill. And that reconciles the budget because unlike the federal government, state governments are obligated to, well, depending on your constitution as a state, we are obligated in Oregon to balance the budget each biennium. So that's what they're doing there. They're taking the pool of money that they have left and assigning it to different projects. So we are hoping that that budget reconciliation is going to include our priorities, and it is going to have some more information for us, hopefully this week. There is not a ton that we can do after that bill is released. A lot of those negotiations go on behind closed doors. We have done all of the due diligence of delivering all of the testimony, doing all the things we need to do, and making sure that that our priorities are ranked highly in the natural resource communities that we need to highlight. So yeah, this is going to happen any day now because we are approaching the end of session pretty quickly, and we don't know till we know. That's a frustrating part of this, but hey, we are all in this together waiting to see what happens. All right, so I wanted to give some updates on some things we touched on last week. So HB 2548, which is the Farm Worker Labor Standards Board bill that was very controversial early in session. There have been substantial changes made to this bill. It is now sometimes when we say a study bill, that's a code word for placeholder. This is an actual study, commissioning a study at Portland State University to do a comprehensive overview of worker treatment and standards in the agricultural industry across Oregon. So this is something that the proponents of the bill, which include PECUN, our farm worker union, as well as other labor organizers and labor unions and immigrant justice groups across the country, or across the state rather, have put forward as a solution to moving the needle this session. And they are very supportive of these changes being made. And FOF has decided that if this bill passes when the study is commissioned, that we will help our farmers engage in the study so that farms of all scales are represented here and we get an accurate picture of what's happening and where we can make improvements to worker safety and treatment and fair labor standards across our sector. Because that's what we believe at FOF is needed to move agriculture into the future, is to make our sector a great place to work and to value the skilled labor that we have here. So there have been substantial changes to this bill. And the fiscal is around $600,000. Like I said, this is it's a challenging landscape for getting funding for these things, but there is a work session scheduled today on this bill with the new amendment today in House Rules. So this afternoon, they will be convening to talk about this. There was a hearing. Now they're going to have a work session. And if the bill passes and money is not allocated to it, they could come back in a special session or an emergency session later in this year. There's been talk about having a special session in September, or come back in the short session to get this money allocated if the revenue forecast changes throughout the year. The other bill that I wanted to talk about really quickly is 1154, SB 1154. So this is a bill that was put forward by the governor's office to try to address the problems in the way our state manages its groundwater management areas. So there are two types of, like, when you talk about critical groundwater areas and groundwater management areas, critical groundwater areas are about water quantity. There is not enough water to go around. Groundwater management areas is that there may be enough water, but that water is contaminated. So we have 3 groundwater management areas that's about water quality. There are 3 in the state, one of which is the South Willamette Valley Groundwater Management Area, which goes from about Junction City up through almost to Corvallis. I happen to live in that one, so I'm aware of it. It is a nitrate contamination area. And then we have the Lower Umatilla Basin Groundwater Management Area, which is also a very, very heavily nitrate contaminated area in the northeast part of the state in Morrow and Umatilla counties, near the port of Morrow and that whole region around Boardman. And then we have the third one is down in Malheur County, where there are some nitrate issues, but also some heavy metal contamination in the water due to some geologic formations and human interaction. So all of these areas do have some, they're a little bit naturally more susceptible to this type of contamination, but that is vastly exacerbated by the human activity that occurs at these places. And that includes heavy industry, agriculture, residential, all of it. It all plays a part in it. And the state has known about these groundwater management areas, especially the one in the Lower Umatilla Basin, for decades. And the contamination has not gotten better. In many, many places, in many of the testing wells, it has consistently gotten worse over that time period. That causes some really serious health problems that impact reproductive health and ability, cause pregnancy loss, cause all kinds of cancers, and lots and lots of life-threatening, prolonged problems for the folks in those areas. And the state does have an obligation to fix this, to make sure that our policies are in line with human health and making sure that we are not poisoning our communities via activities that the state has deemed are okay. That's the job of the state, to figure out where the balance is. 1154 is an attempt by the governor's office to give some additional powers and guardrails to the folks who are supposed to be managing these groundwater management areas, to give them more power to tell both residential, commercial, and industrial users, including agriculture, what they can and cannot do and practices they are allowed to use in these sensitive areas to make to help mitigate this problem and reverse the groundwater contamination. So this bill started out as something that we could get behind and that we were excited about. Some of the changes would require some mandatory action, which is not always the case and seems to be necessary to reverse this very dangerous groundwater contamination in a large part of our state. But there has been a lot of industry pushback from conventional agriculture groups and industry. And the local community says that the most recent draft and the most recent amendments do not do enough to move the needle at all. They are not making any substantive changes to the current management, and they have been very clear that it will not improve groundwater quality. It will simply rebrand the status quo. And because of that analysis from the community that is most impacted by it, that is how FOF makes our decisions. And they have been very clear that this does not go far enough and that the rollbacks are too far. And so FOF has decided to withdraw our support for this proposal and stand with the community most impacted by poor groundwater management across the state. Unfortunately, because this is the governor's priority, it is still moving forward though. So we want to be clear that this is not enough action and there needs to be additional action moving forward. It has passed out of the Senate Rules Committee and is going to a floor vote. It has its second reading today. So this is something that you're going to continue to hear about from us, and we are going to continue to keep an eye on and push for greater action, because especially when the voices of rural communities are being disregarded in the process, we need to see real action when it comes to preserving rural water quality and listening to the communities who are impacted by these environmental justice concerns. So you're going to hear more about this from us in the coming years as more action needs to be taken, and this bill will not solve the problem. So it doesn't do anything bad. It's not going to make things worse, but it is going to maintain the status quo, which does not improve water quality. Very disappointing to see. All right, looking ahead. This is the calendar for the last part of the session. We are fast approaching the target sine die, and there has been a lot of discussion about whether or not that sine die is going to stand. Sine die is the Latin term for the end of the session. I have heard that no, we're not going to close early on the target sine die, and then we've heard yes, and it seems like I thought last week they were going to go all the way to the end of the month, but seems like this week, based on how they are not scheduling further hearings or further meetings in a lot of these committees, that they are looking at hitting that target sine die as close as possible. So the session could potentially end on Wednesday, which is why this is our last update. And that means that we will be seeing that budget reconciliation bill right now. There's going to be a lot of floor sessions, lots and lots of rapid action, and we do anticipate the session closing imminently. So just want to flag that it has to be over by the 29th, but it could be over as soon as Wednesday. Which leads us to inviting you to our end of session recap. We will be parsing through all of the things that happened this session, bringing up all of the bills that passed or did not, and giving you an end of session recap on Wednesday, July 16th from 3 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. It's going to be hot out there. We know that. Can't be in the greenhouse at 3 p.m. in July, so come on in, get in the shade, listen to the end of session recap. It'll be great. We'll tell you all about what we see as things that are going to impact small farms across the state, and talk about the impact and new policies that are going to be taking shape. Join us on the 16th for more. All right, so the last thing that we want to talk about today in our 3 minutes that we have left is that there was a bill this session, I believe it was 3133, that was brought forward by the Oregon Property Owners Association and would have made substantial changes to the farm stand code in land use for EFU and farm forest zone land. So there was a legislative working group brought together, of which FOF was a part, and we were able to give our opinion on some of these topics, but it was found that there was not necessarily a need for statutory change. There was enough there that the Department of Land Conservation and Development, who oversees land use in our state, thought that they could change via a rulemaking process or clarify via a rulemaking process that we would not be, we didn't need to change the statute. We could just do a rulemaking process. And so they opened a rulemaking process on these 5 topics. The primary use test, so percentage of income from farm products in the farm stand to allow you to have that retail outlet on your EFU or farm forest zone land, because retail outlets are not allowable under EFU zone land code. They're not allowable use. But farm stands are a sub 1 use, so you do not need additional tests or anything like that, not like a sub 2 use like agritourism. A farm stand to sell products of the farm and agricultural products of the local area is a sub 1 use, so there needs to be a test to make sure that that is an actual farm stand and not just an independent retail establishment located on EFU zone land, because that's not allowed. Then promotional activities, including inside and outside of the farm stand building and structures, that is independent of building code. So if your building is not built to a code where you're allowed to have the public inside of it, you can't have the public inside of it. But if you built your building to a code where the public can safely be inside the structure, then are you allowed to have your promotional activities for your farm stand inside or outside the building? There is currently some disparate interpretations at different county planning offices, and so talking about that. Also talking about activities, fee-based activities specifically, that promote not only the sale of the farm products, but agriculture as a whole. So educating people on your practices as a farm, the way that you conduct your business, how you protect your land, why you make the choices that you make, the food system at large. Those kinds of educational opportunities are something people really want to do, and in our opinion at FOF are necessary for creating that bond between eaters and farmers and helping people make the connection between the food that they eat and the way we produce food in Oregon. And on-farm education, if it's not directly linked to the sale of a product, is something that is variably allowed. And so we talked about that. This upcoming meeting is going to be on prepared foods with a direct tie to the farm operation in the local agricultural area, and whether or not you are allowed to have prepared foods at your farm stand, impacts on neighboring farms, including traffic, road usage, interrupting their farming practice. Like if you have a farm stand and you make complaints against them for doing maybe a less appealing or more fragrant part of their farming practice, are you impacting the ability of neighboring farms to conduct their agricultural enterprise? So all of these things are topics of the rulemaking committee. There are some office hours that we are having. We're having one of them today, June 16th at 2:30 p.m. We're going to be discussing prepared foods and cumulative impact on neighboring farms. So if those are of interest to you, please tune in with us at 2:30. And we will be having our last office hours, kind of bringing all of these topics together. We space them out based on what the topic of the most closely following RAC meeting would be. And so our next one will be on July 14th, Monday, July 14th, and we can discuss all loose ends at that time. So join us for that one if you want to discuss any of these topics, and make sure that you're weighing in with FOF's RAC participation so that you can be part of our comments. There will also be public comment opportunities at the Rulemaking Advisory Committee meetings. So the ones that are coming up are June 24th and July 18th. There will be a public comment period after this, so September 25th-ish, because the way that this works is that right now they're in the Rulemaking Advisory Committee section. We're giving a lot of comments. We're telling them what we think it should say. And then during the month of August, they will take all of the comments, write some changes to draft rules, submit it to legal review to make sure that we're not going outside of the statute with the rule changes. They will say, yes, that's legal. No, that's not legal. Revise, whatever. And then the draft rules will come out in September, and there will be a formal public comment period during that time. That you'll probably see some analysis from us about what we think the rules say or don't say, or do or don't do. And you can submit comments to that as well. And there will be a public meeting in that period as well, where you could submit verbal comments in addition to written. So lots of ways to get involved. But please join us this afternoon if you have thoughts on these topics, or join us at our next office hours on Monday, July 14th at 2:30. So that is all that I have for you. Thank you so much for going on this journey with us this session. We have made an incredible amount of change and operated in some really difficult circumstances. So thank you so much to everyone who has come out to make change with us in the Oregon State Legislature.